You know,
usually.
there was a group of them that I worked. I worked at Station One when I worked at Station One when I worked in a line, and there was a bunch of them, these Navy guys at Station One, and very early, it was kind of cute, and I never, honestly I didn't pay very much attention to it at the time because I was busy trying to figure out how in the world the fire department operated. But they would tease me that say, "Well, someday you're going to be an admiral." Was kind of their terms.
Wow.
And then I kept getting promoted just because the system grew so much. If you stood in one place and you had a pulse, they'd promote you. So we just kept going in the process. And then they would reinforce it as you got promoted, you know. Well, I told you, Admiral. Yeah,
I had my eye. I
that's
knew
right.
you were a winner
That's
from
right.
the beginning.
That's
kid.
right. Yeah. No. It was. They didn't do it in a mean, sarcastic kind of way. It was kind of in a kind sort of way too. But it was interesting.
I think that's when we were talking, and the chief and I have the incredible pleasure of being able to hang out with one another from time to time and wax poetic, save the world like we did last night over a lemonade and an iced tea. I drink lemonade, he drinks iced tea, so there's something.
Drink the hard stuff.
There's something dramatically wrong with this man. But I think when you were talking about these characters and the fact that they did allow for that kind of diversity, I don't think people were as easily threatened back then as they are today. I mean, I think that they really genuinely wanted you to succeed, and they really wanted to be part of it, and I think there was a kindness, if you will, that was easier to express back then. I mean, you didn't feel like you were opening it was easier to be vulnerable, I think, and I think we can get that back. I think maybe if we just change our rhetoric or I think in the fire service anyway, we can get that back.
You know, when I came on the Phoenix Fire Department, and I mean this respectfully and affectionately, it wasn't a very advanced system. It was a very traditional system. It was managed in a very autocratic, kind of military sort of way. Not mean-spirited, but very, very strict, if you may, in that sense. It was hard to be progressive because they tended to emphasize control so much. I mean, that mentality is very control-oriented, which is part of that discipline in the process. So once I got there, I was frustrated because I had the sense there's more to this than we were doing. In other words, there's a larger science. In other words, there's all those books on the bookcase, and we're not doing a lot of the stuff that are in those books. So, and it was kind of interesting because it came together at the same time. There were a couple of the officers that I worked for that said, you've got to go to school. And I had been going to college before that, but they said, no, you got to get out of here and go to school. I said, well, where would I go to school? And they said, well, you got to go to Oklahoma State.
Which was the school.
In those days, it was the West Point of fire protection, they
right.
called it.
And still is.
Still is,
Absolutely.
Still is,
Great
yeah.
school. And
Yeah.
no disrespect to Maryland.
Yeah, no, not at
any
all.
of the fine institutions.
Little bit different focus.
Right,
So, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And in those days, the school
Especially
put out
if you wanted to come back as a line firefighter.
to the firefighters, absolutely,
Right.
particularly in those days in 1959.
Right.
Yeah.
If you didn't want to be an academic or you didn't want to be
an engineer.
An engineer.
Yeah.
That was a school where you could come back and be a practitioner.
So, and a couple of them were pretty straightforward about it. I was saying, get out of here.
Yeah.
And they almost put it in the sense that we need you to do that for us. It was an interesting kind of mission, if you may. I mean, I didn't mean to think of myself as the missionary at all, but
Well, they're grooming the future admiral.
well, it was interesting.
But that's
yeah.
another piece of that military training, if you will, is that if you look at the military, and just my sons are involved in it, they actually look at guys and they pick them out and they do mentor them along.
Yeah.
You know, and they take great pride in that. Even the enlisted people who do it take tremendous pride in pushing someone through the system.
And they're pushy.
And they're pushy.
They're pushy.
It's called pushing.
That's right. No, you said the right word. Yeah, it was. No.
Yeah.
So anyway, I applied for an education leave of absence, and I went to Oklahoma State for 3 semesters, and I had enough college that I finished. It was a 2-year program then. So I got a degree in fire protection technology in 1960, which is 50 years ago now.
Wow.
He went back to the fire
Did
department.
they
and
teach you how to
stayed there.
install those carbon tet extinguishers in the
We
side?
did carbon tet. Yeah, that's right. But it was a perfect time for me and a perfect fit, because I had a million questions and they had pretty much an answer to every one of them. So it was just, it couldn't have occurred, I think, at a more ideal time for me. Sort of in other words, I was hired. I was a fireman in those days.
And how old were you about this time? You were probably about
22.
You were 22.
22 years old. Yeah.
22 years old, and you found yourself going to Oklahoma State,
yeah.
after a year on the line,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. And I went back, and I went in January, and I came back, and I spent the summer. I worked during the summer on the fire department. Then I went back and I had 2 semesters.
So Phoenix Fire Department back in 1959, 60 was open enough to allowing a line firefighter to go to college, take a leave of absence, if you will, sabbatical, get their education and come back.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about it, that's about as progressive as it gets, because I can't think of too many organizations today that would afford somebody that opportunity. They'll help you get your education, but I don't know too many who would afford a guy the opportunity to take a sabbatical, hold their position, let them come back.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was, you know, and I applied to the fire chief, and I kind of broke the chain of command, and it was probably the best thing I did, because I think he was a lot more benevolent than the officers below him. I think they were a lot more control oriented. So it's just luck. Part of it was just lucky, I think.
But I think even looking at you, it's easier to be benevolent as the fire chief than it is as a company officer or a battalion chief.
Yeah.
Because the battalion chief has that, or the company officer or the line chief has that direct problem-solving issue continuously all day long.
Particularly the guy below him was very control oriented, and his approach was that the answer is no. What's the question? So
we start with no.
So I knew that applying
Yeah,
to him, looking back on it, I don't know what I would have done if he had denied it.
But I bet you one of the guys, I'll bet you one of the characters you were talking about sat you down at the kitchen table, because you wouldn't know that intuitively from that level. Somebody in that system that was pushing you had to say, don't send the application to Smith.
that's right,
I want you to go right to Jones.
No, that's right. That's exactly right too.
You know, and
In fact, I think the guy that did it probably went to the fire chief
and let him know you were coming.
and said, "Yeah, I think I don't think that was just an accident."
We got this goofy kid who's the next admiral.
And he says, you know, if he doesn't come back, I will hire another guy. But if he comes back, who knows? We might be able to use him.